Is this on?
I'm Laurie Achtman with the Penn Center for Innovation. We're so pleased you could all join us here this afternoon and that you're so excited to talk to each other. But we have a great program for you today. So if you could please quiet down. Thank you. This is our fourth annual JP Morgan program. It's been a very exciting initiative for Penn to do. When we first started, we had maybe not as many things to feature out here, and today there's so many commercialization activities and projects underway at Penn in Philadelphia that it's hard to choose what to feature when we come out here. But it's very exciting. We have some new projects and a lot of new initiatives to talk about, and I'm really pleased with the amazing group of leaders, scientists, faculty, and entrepreneurs that are joining us here today. And I know it wasn't an easy journey this year for many of you, so thanks again for being here. I feel really lucky that I've gotten to work with many of the people who are going to be speaking today. In particular, I've gotten to work very closely with Craig Carnevoli, Penn's Executive Vice President, who is joining us this year. He's been the driving force behind Penn's new innovation center and campus called the Pennovation Works, and has also taken a leadership role in establishing Philadelphia as a center of innovation. So he's going to talk about a lot of this progress, which we haven't really focused on when we've been out here. And also my boss, John Swartley, the managing director of PCI for the past 5 years, and he's been with Penn at PCI for over 10. He's not someone to brag a lot about what we do, but we've had a really amazing fiscal year 18 this year, with some amazing numbers. I tried to feature some of our literature out there. But in particular, we closed almost 700 agreements with the private sector to develop early stage Penn technology. And a lot of that credit goes to, I would say, the steady leadership and the vision that John brings to the job. So it's been a real privilege to be part of it. I also wanted to highlight there's a number of Penn and PCI folks here, so hopefully you've all gotten to talk to them. And it's great to have such a talented team to be doing this work with. So without further ado, I'd like to invite John up to the podium. He's going to be moderating the first part of our program.
Thanks, Laurie. Yeah, very nice remarks. Thank you, and welcome everyone. Full room. That's great to see. I'm particularly glad to see some wine and beer out there. That's good as well. We're going to try to keep this somewhat informal. I think we've got some great speakers for you today. But first off, I want to thank our host, the Wharton School. This is a lovely campus. We're really delighted to be able to present this program again out here. I'd like to thank our event sponsor, Saul Ewing LLP, our fantastic panel of speakers, of course. I also want to thank Laurie and her team, as well as the support team from Saul Ewing for all their hard work in organizing this event. It takes a huge amount of effort, and we're all grateful, so thank you. So as Laurie said, today is, I believe this is the fourth annual event that we've held during the JP Morgan conference, and it's interesting when I was kind of thinking about the fact that this is the fourth anniversary. It's also about the fifth anniversary of the launch of the Penn Center for Innovation, which we launched at Penn. In order to create a different type of organization from a traditional technology transfer organization, and one that was focused more on creating business opportunities and business partnerships than strictly facilitating transactions. And so what we're all about now is creating meaningful business relationships and opportunities for partnership. And in order to do that, it goes way beyond the traditional patenting and licensing model and brings in a much broader range of business development activities, such as new venture creation, and alliance creation, sponsored research, and all different kinds of interactive partnerships and business structures. Lori hinted at the fact that the number of agreements that we have helped to facilitate over the last fiscal year has climbed significantly. She's right. I'm not particularly boastful, but I would point out that the number of agreements over the last 5 years has risen considerably, over 250% actually over that 5-year period, and that's a big number. But I think what it's also representative of is the change in focus from pure transactions to building meaningful business relationships. Because embedded in that sizable increase in agreements are the range and the scope of those agreements has increased just as significantly. So instead of doing 250 primarily license agreements, we're now doing 700 agreements across a broad spectrum of business activities. And we're going to, in the keynote address today, we'll talk about one of those very specific new types of relationships. But we like to pride ourselves now on trying to facilitate relationships in ways that work for our partners as opposed to trying to collapse them into existing structures. And I think we've been somewhat or more than a little successful at doing that. In addition to the vast increase in commercialization activities, we've launched over 200 new companies over the last decade, raised more than $1 billion worth of investment capital into those companies. The market value of those companies is well above that. And the other interesting statistic that I always tend to cite is the percentage of the university's research and development budget that is driven by partnerships with the private sector has grown pretty significantly during the period of transitioning from a pure transfer to a Center for Innovation model. When we started kind of thinking about doing this, we were probably in about the 5 to 7% range of the total research enterprise coming from private sector partnerships, and that's fairly typical of large research universities. Nowadays, after 5 years of creating this new structure and this new focus, we're closing in at about 15% of the total R&D budget, and on $1 billion, that's a significant amount of sponsored research each year. So I do want to focus in a little bit on that, and I'm going to invite our keynote speakers up in a moment to talk about the partnership activities at Penn. I'm really proud of all the work that we've done to convene these new and creative partnerships, and I think you'll enjoy the discussion. So without a lot of further ado, I'm going to introduce our two keynote speakers. The first is Craig Carnaroli, who mentioned previously. He's the Executive Vice President of the university and the most senior non-academic officer at Penn. Craig has been shaping Penn's physical campus, physical strength, and operational efficiency since 2004. During his tenure at Penn, Craig has led a variety of initiatives to support Penn's myriad operations, including enhancing long-term credit ratings issued by Moody's and Standard & Poor's, increasing student financial aid, implementing a long-range plan to reduce Penn's carbon footprint, developing new housing and dining amenities, planning Penn's campus with a 30-year time horizon, adding hundreds of thousands of square feet of new buildings. Craig's been very, very busy. He also has academic roots on both the East and the West Coast, having graduated from both the Wharton School of Business with a Bachelor of Science in Economics in Philadelphia, as well as having an MBA from Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. But on a personal note, I would like to note that Craig is a truly visionary leader. He was actually one of the primary architects of the Penn Center for Innovation. Worked very closely with me during the conception and the implementation of the center, and I do consider him to be a mentor, a colleague, and a friend. So thank you, Craig. Appreciate your being here. And second, we are really pleased to be joined by Melinda Richter, who is the global head of J-Labs at Johnson & Johnson Innovation. As the global head of J-Labs, Melinda fosters J&J's external R&D engine and supports the innovation community by creating capital-efficient commercialization models that give early-stage companies a big company advantage. Prior to joining J-Labs, Melinda was founder and CEO of Prescience International, an award-winning firm dedicated to accelerating research to the patient, a key experience which helped to form the basis for J-Labs' operational infrastructure. And prior to Prescience, Melinda held posts across a variety of functional areas with a global corporation, Nortel Networks, in locations such as Research Triangle Park, New York, Toronto, London, Hong Kong, and Beijing, before arriving in San Francisco, where she's now based. She holds a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Saskatchewan in Canada and an MBA from INSEAD in France. Terrific. So I'm going to welcome both Craig and Melinda up to the dais, and we are going to have a video. Yeah. You want to start it now?
Yeah.
So let me just go ahead and. They're not going to block the video. They've seen the video. So what we're going to do is we'd like to start you off with a video to show you a little bit about Craig and Melinda's visionary leadership and support in developing this brand new partnership between Penn and J&J Innovations through the J-Labs program.
Is a city steeped in rich history. It's the birthplace of a nation with a spirited community that truly defines its greatness. They're pioneers, creators, builders, academics, and healers. They see the world differently. And like the trailblazers before them, they push groundbreaking ideas forward that continue to define the future for others. It's here, in Philadelphia and the surrounding region, where aspirations become reality, where developing leaders are empowered to find their voice, and professionals passionate for change converge and collaborate to reinvent what's possible. It's the home of our nation's first hospital and medical school. It's where the first X-ray image was captured and the first robotic spine surgery was performed. From revolutionary cell-based immunotherapies like CAR-T for the treatment of advanced leukemia, to novel gene therapies for treating patients with rare conditions such as inherited vision loss, the list of outstanding achievements from this talented community continues to grow. In this great city, amidst historic emblems and national landmarks, a new partnership has developed. One designed to further inspire the entrepreneurial spirit and turn the biggest and best breakthroughs in healthcare into reality. The University of Pennsylvania and Johnson & Johnson Innovation are proud to announce the nation's first J-Pod. Located in the heart of the Pennovation Works campus, J-Pod at Philadelphia offers the local academic, life science, and technology community access to Johnson & Johnson's robust resources and global expertise through telepresence connectivity and in-person programming. Now, the already thriving regional innovation ecosystem has a new, powerful global partner. Together, we will unite our collective strengths and propel new medical and life science ideas forward. Philadelphia has long been a place where innovators inspire each other to achieve the extraordinary, and that revolutionary legacy will continue to grow as your ventures become reality. Join the community at JPod at Philadelphia and be the change in the future of life sciences.
Okay. So welcome, Craig and Melinda. I thought we could get things kind of kicked off by, I have some questions, but I thought maybe it would be helpful and useful to just give you a few minutes to kind of talk about what you do and why you're here.
Sure. So I'm going to talk about something different. That's
Sure.
okay, John. So you queued me up for something different, John. So
He's
I think
already breaking the rules.
Exactly.
That's exactly what you should all be doing, breaking all the rules.
Exactly. So, when you think about Penn, two messages I hope you take away from is that, one, we are routinely ranked among the top 5 in the innovative universities in the world. And it's been a very conscious effort on our part to raise innovation to be a greater part of our culture. Part of what enables of that is we are also one of the nation's leading recipients in federal funding. Now, those are the results, but sort of how do we get there is really, I think, based on 3 things. And rather than the 4 Ps many of us learned in business school, it's really the 3 Ps, which is people. One of the things I'm just blown away with, and you're going to be in the next session with the panel we have, is the talent and the quality of the people at Penn. And I think it's just borne itself out in so many different ways. The second thing is we've been very dedicated to placemaking, and that's why having a partnership with someone like J&J around the J-Pod, having the Innovation Center, but then able to reimagine it 2 years later to say, hey, this is a unique asset that we can incorporate to make the place even better, has been a huge part of it. And finally, John, it's been the policies, if you will, and the bureaucratic policies, but just if you don't have the right approach and policies to doing partnerships, then you can't help them succeed. And so by basically trying to transform a traditional technology transfer office into something that's more holistic and having the right approaches to dealing with, whether it's the VC community, whether it's pharma, whether it's the med tech community, that's kind of what's making the difference.
Terrific. Melinda, you've been working with a variety of academic institutions, and now you've got a program that we've gotten underway at Penn. Would you like to tell us a little bit about why you see value in the connection between what you do and what's going on in the academic sphere?
Sure. Well, let me start off by talking about what Johnson & Johnson innovation is. So at Johnson & Johnson, we fundamentally believe that the best science and technology should become the best solutions for patients and consumers around the world. And if we believe that to be true, which we do, we also have to be humble enough to say that the best science and technology is just as likely to come from outside the walls of a big company like J&J as inside. But when it's outside, when it's with you or innovators, you face so many hurdles to actually creating a viable commercial entity that can get all the way to patients or to consumers. And so what we want to do is take down those hurdles that face all of you to starting something new and give you the best possible chance of making your new company work. And if you're successful, well then we're successful. So our goal is to give you access to infrastructure, to resources, to coaching, to funders, which include not just us, but other people out there in the market, whether it's venture capitalists or angels or even our competitors, right? Our goal is to help you be successful, because the more solutions that get out there to patients and consumers, the more everybody wins. Now, we think we're going to win a larger share of the pie because hopefully we get to know each other better and you'll want to work with us, but it doesn't matter as long as you get it to the people who need them. And so our goal in creating Johnson & Johnson Innovation was to locally embed ourselves in ecosystems around the world with the express intent to help translate things to the marketplace. And so we are looking for places like Penn where there is this richness of innovation that crosses many, many different boundaries. So at J&J, we're interested in pharmaceuticals, biotech pharma. We're interested in medical devices. We're interested in consumer health. And we're interested in any technology that goes across any of those things. And so when we're looking for a place to be, we're looking for something that can fuel all of that. And that was what was exciting about coming to Penn. We saw the tapestry of innovation that already existed there. And what was interesting is, when we set up our first J-Pod, this was our first J-Pod, we have these J-Labs. J-Labs are typically these sites where we usually have around 40,000 square feet, half the space is all common research space filled with capital equipment, or a common business space where people can get together and exchange ideas and come up with new ones. And then the other half of the space are individual wet lab and dry lab and office modules where you can get started with your work. And the whole goal is you can get started with something as small as a 5-foot bench and literally put it on your credit card like a gym membership, as opposed to having to use all your life savings, and grow and scale as you have the credibility and resources to grow. And as we were doing these, it takes significant investment and significant time to get up and running. And so we believe that we need to be just as innovative as our innovators, and we need to innovate on that model and come up with something that was quicker and faster and easier to get started in your market, to learn and grow and to help catalyze that ecosystem. And so we realized what we need is a little J-pod, a little footprint inside an already amazing innovation center where we can have a place where people can get connected to resources of J&J, can participate in educational programs where we can bring in investors and really kind of get the innovation started, or at least build on what's already there. And so we decided to come up with this J-pod model, and it seemed like the best place to do it was with Pennovation. And I have to tell you, I am so excited about the work that we've seen there. We've seen every kind of innovation. We've seen 3D printing models that are actually creating vascularized cells, which is pretty darn exciting. We've seen old nanoparticle therapy treatment for tumors. We've seen nanoscale implants for the eye to deal with macular degeneration. I mean, it's amazing what we've seen there so far. And what's interesting is we had our opening there, and we had some of our R&D leaders there, and first thing they did was jump up and go run and give their business cards to these entrepreneurs, because what they saw was truly groundbreaking. And that's what this model is about. We want to create heroes in your own hometown, where you can be an entrepreneur that can have success both for patients and consumers all over the world, but also for your hometown, where you can stay close to your community, where you can build an economic base and create jobs for people who want to do, things that are impactful. They want to make a difference and stay at home. And that's what we saw at Philadelphia in the past. I think many people felt like they had to go to Silicon Valley, or they had to go to New York or to Boston. And now seeing these young people do these incredible things right there, it's remarkable. It's very rewarding to see that kind of innovation and that kind of, determination to do something that's new and different.
That's incredible. So, Craig, I have a question for you that relates to what I sense, and I've been at Penn less years than you have, but multiple 100-year-old institution is well known for being an educator, educating students across a broad spectrum of disciplines. Also well known as a big research center. The research is maybe a little more recent, but they're both well established. But one of the things that we've noticed, and we've talked a little bit about this, is that large research universities have gotten more and more involved in a third element of the academic sphere, and that is the translation of technology that's created at universities into the commercial sphere, into products, goods and services. So what I'm curious, because you've experienced this, is what's shifted on the academic side that's kind of driving this this interest in being so much more directly involved in the commercial translation of science?
Sure. I think there's a couple of factors at play. One is the fact that there's a real desire to take advantage of the expertise and resources that industry can come to bear, that basically, as smart as a community we have, there's the practical application and the decisions that will get made that will move something faster. There's another reality, which is that since 2011, the amount of federal funding that's been available for research has declined, or on real dollars. And so there's a desire to sort of make that up. And one of the things we've been doing with our startup companies is actually having corporate-sponsored research projects back to the university. There's a third element, which is I think as we're seeing more interest among faculty in being involved in this type of entrepreneurial activity. So, and I think also with the infrastructure we've created through your group, it's sort of enabled that activity to continue.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up, are there areas that you think maybe shouldn't be developed at universities, or is sort of, kind of a case by case in terms of, how far you take the commercial development path in partnership with the university? Putting you a little bit on the spot here.
He is putting me on the spot.
Because I like to test you, as you know.
Exactly. So I think the challenge we have in a university is I often say there's so many good ideas. How are we good at sort of picking and choosing? Shouldn't they be sort of market tested? And so the big debate in universities is, should we be investing in our own technology? In other words, should I choose Michael over Melinda? And so there I prefer more of a market test. And one of the things we are piloting though, and I think this gets to a conversation I had earlier today with one of our alumni, is how are universities comfortable taking more risk? And so one thing we're piloting with our leaders at Penn Medicine is a co-investment model where of our most promising ideas, particularly in sort of digital health and in cell and gene therapy, then you're going to see some of these companies here today where if they're sort of accredited investors bleeding around, will Penn co-invest up to a certain percentage in the round to basically be more involved in the technology and keep more engagement versus a pure licensing equity type arrangement. And so I guess the limits I draw is how much the university should be involved in the capitalization of the enterprise.
I guess I'm going to keep testing you.
You are.
So, Melinda, you very articulately described, that they're one of the huge drivers of the J-Labs model and the J&J innovation model is to support the entrepreneurs and provide them with the tools and the depth of knowledge and the shared experience to move forward. And I guess you could look for entrepreneurs anywhere, but one of the interesting things when I look at your map, I can see that a lot of the locations are pretty close to academic centers, universities, and I'm just curious, is there something about co-locating or being close to sort of the academic centers that is kind of part of the overall plan, or is talk a little bit about it if you would mind.
Sure. I mean, when we first started out, we went to obvious places. We actually started in San Diego because we had a big research and development site there, and we could take advantage of the infrastructure. So it was a very low cost for us to get started and experiment with the model. And then, of course, after that, you go the two likely suspects in North America, the Bay Area and Boston. And then after that, it became a question mark. Where should we go? Because after that, many things seemed pretty equal, right? There was, I would call them very commercially naive ecosystems. And so then you have to look for things that give you a clue that there's something there to work with. And it's definitely about research institutions, academic institutions, patents, talent, clinical prowess. And when you start looking at that, then your list comes much shorter. And so our first place after our usual suspects was Houston, and mainly because the Texas Medical Center was very passionate about bringing innovation to their ecosystem, and they had all of those things, and so we got started there. And for us, working with academics or even the students, the things that are coming out from these young people was just amazing. And we wanted to place a lot of little bets everywhere. And it's amazing to think about what are the things that are going to be the next generation of technologies. I'll never forget going to Boston, and I heard these two young people, one was still at Harvard, one was at MIT, and they were up there talking about something that I had no idea what they were saying, but they sounded really smart. And so I said, listen, we're having a Christmas party tonight with a bunch of J&J people. Would you come? I want, there's somebody there who's kind of an expert in your space. I want them to talk to you. And just come, we'll have some fun. And they came, and I sat them down and talked to this J&J expert. And afterwards, I said to him, what do you think? He's like, oh my God. He goes, I tell you, I'm an expert in this space. And I still didn't understand half of what they said, but they're really smart, and I think they're onto something. And that's how it goes, right? I mean, you guys see things from a very different perspective than we do. And there's some very basic problems that need to be solved. I'll give you an example. We just funded a company called Carrot. And Carrot has this application on your phone that it also has a breath sensor to help people stop smoking. Smoking is the leading cause of preventable illness, right? 500,000 people in the U.S. die each year from smoking-related illnesses. 6 million people around the globe. And it's a very preventable illness, and what we need is a way to help people stop smoking. And so Carrot has this breath sensor that is FDA approved that every time you smoke, you take a breath into it, and it measures the carbon monoxide in your system. And also you log in your cigarettes, and it has all of these customized engagement tools to help you stop, including coaching and community. And, in one sense, it's kind of basic. But for us, the impact that it could have for people's lives is huge. So yeah, we're going to put money into that. Now, you guys could come up with that. You don't need to be a scientist to come up with it. You can have a great idea of something that's a big unmet need or a big health opportunity, and then research the area, go out and find people who are doing science and technology in that space. And listen, digital health is all about behavioral science and biophysical measures. That's an exciting area of opportunity. I was just talking on a panel at Ernst & Young this morning about that. So listen, the opportunities are endless. And we love small companies that are going to have that spirit of can-do. We're going to figure it out no matter what. So, for me, there is so much richness of opportunity, and there's so much money out there. 2018 was such a frothy year. I don't think 2019 is going to be as frothy. But listen, it's a great time to start a company. No question about it.
John, just to build on what Melinda's saying too, one of the values to us of being a partner with Johnson & Johnson in this is sort of access to their networks. And so just so you have a sense for how it works, I mean, they don't take any IP from these companies. They're basically creating an environment, creating them access to their networks, access to their venture capital partners. And also, if you, let's say in Philadelphia working on something, but they know in Houston an orthopedics device, they're a little further along, let's connect those two, because ultimately your goal is how do we improve health of society. And that's what's so impressive about J&J is that their aspirations are so impactful to the world.
Yeah, if you need access to regulatory experts or policy experts, or if you need to understand how big the market is. I mean, we spend so much money on research studies. We want to give it away. We've already invested in it. We want to give you everything you can do, or everything you need to help make it work. Because it's hard. Let's face it, it's a hard road, but so rewarding if you can make it work. So we want to open up our stuff, no strings attached, and help you get to a proof of concept that will allow you to raise money. And we hope you want to take our money, but you can take other people's money. That's the goal. And by doing that, listen, more people will come to the table. More of our competitors will come to the table. More venture capitalists will come to the table. And that means all of us win because more solutions are going. Listen, this industry has a problem. We don't get enough out there because it is harder and longer and takes more money. So we're trying to speed it up. And yes, we hope everybody wins. We hope we'll win a bigger piece of the pie. But we think everybody will win in this.
So are there any current MBAs in the room? Okay. So I'm going to make a prediction. So I'm seeing this trend of companies wanting to get closer to universities. So essentially, my hypothesis is they're looking to get rid of the middleman. So don't run to the job at McKinsey and BCG, okay? Because in fact, the companies, this is true, we had the CEO of Travelers come down and look at the Innovation Center. Vanguard is worried about being disrupted. They want to be closer to the Wharton fintech people. Essentially, companies want to get closer to the to the exposure to the early stage ideas, and this model is one way for that to happen.
I would also say, especially in the US, if you look, so I spend 80% of my time on the road. And if I look at what's going on in Europe and Asia, each has their strengths. In particular in Asia, when it comes to, technology-infused healthcare opportunities, I mean, they're pretty far ahead. And it works in their system because they can create a bit of a closed system, right? Here we have a very fragmented system. The hospitals don't necessarily talk to all the payers and providers. And, it's hard to see economics over time in a big system like this. And so what they're doing in China, for example, is something called like We Doctor, funded by Tencent, is remarkable. If we could do anything close to that here in the United States, it would be huge. So anything you would look at from the East to say, how can we do that here? We would be all over that. So there are lots of opportunities out there. If you want to be bold and listen, we're trying to make it not such a big and hard decision to do, right? That's the point of giving you all of these resources. It's about saying, listen, if you've got a big healthcare problem that you want to solve, right? It has to be a big unmet need or a way to prevent people from getting sick in the first place. We'll figure out how to help you. That's the goal. And it's an exciting time right now for the U.S. in particular.
So I have a question that probably you could both opine on. It has to do with spent the morning actually looking at an incubator model out here with you, Craig. But even if I look at Philadelphia, there's got to be at least a half dozen, maybe more, maybe a dozen co-working models just in greater Philadelphia. So to your earlier point, it's great to have all these different ideas, different solutions to similar problems. But we in terms of this partnership, we drilled down toward one solution. So I'm kind of curious, with all the different co-working models out there, why is this one this is the right one for what we've done at the Penn Innovation Center?
I think for us, it basically draws on some of the real key strengths of Penn, which is that with 12 schools co-located on one campus, we've been very clear in trying to build intersections. And so of the 7 companies that are part of JPOD, actually the leading school at the moment is the School of Engineering, okay? So you'd say, gee, I would expect it to be a medical school. I'd expect it to be your nursing school. But no, it's actually the School of Engineering. And in fact, you're going to hear from some of the folks here that are actually members of the JPOD. But I think part of it is the strengths of J&J complement the strengths of Penn so well. But I'd also say, John, what we learned this morning talking to Gino from UCSF, Gino said, Greg, where's Gino? I was going to call him out. There he is. He's a really good man if you get a chance to meet him on this thing. So there's some key elements of all these sessions that make these co-working spaces successful. As he said, it's the programming, it's the access to resources, it's the sort of density, vitality of the model, and also it's also a space for people to graduate to, and that's something we're sort of joint struggling with.
Well, and so one of the things that we do for every company that comes in, we call it a JPAL. We put J in front of everything.
It's true.
My name is actually
We put
Jalinda.
Benjamin Franklin in front of everything.
And that JPAL is somebody who's an expert in the space at J&J that can be your coach, can be your mentor. And they can connect you with other JPALs that might have a specific functional expertise that you might need. And where we can bring our expertise to the table, we will. So regulatory, commercial understanding of what are the big unmet needs out there, the policy, the ethics, which is going to be big, particular in digital health, or manufacturing, any of that stuff. We want to give it to you, and let's face it, the folks at J&J that are part of a big corporation, they want to be a part of innovation. This is really fun for them. For them to live vicariously through you doing something new, that's awesome. So and that's what we can bring to the table. Plus, we bring it from across the pharmaceutical divisions, medical device, consumer health. We're the largest global healthcare company in the world. We have the most diverse portfolio. So if you're anywhere in this space, you're probably in our space. So that's why we want to be there to be your partner. And we want to create this community of people who are passionate about making a difference. So I started out my career in the tech industry, and I was really excited about being in the tech industry because it was like the hot, sexy place to be in at the time. And I came from a very humble beginning. And so for me, being a part of this, where the money was really important. Until one day, I got bit by a bug when I was living in China, and I was told I wasn't going to make it. And, that changed my life. And when they told me there was nothing more they could do for me, all I could do was hope and pray that there was somebody out there who was fighting for me. And I thought to myself, I got a chance to stay here on this planet, that I would come back and try to change the system, that I would create this community of people who were people that other people could look to. They were hoping and praying that somebody was fighting for them, that these were the people that were fighting for them. So we're all about that. We want to create this community of people that are fighting for patients all over the world. And we want to help you. We want to support you. We want you to be there for each other. That's part of the fun. I met a bunch of our companies last night from New York. And oh my God, they love each other. They help each other. They exchange resources and contacts. And it's like being back in college again. And that's what we need to do, right? The challenges are that big and that important. And so that's why it's important to us. So we'd love for you to be a part of that community. If we can help you in any way, we absolutely would. And we look forward to seeing if there's a way we can make a really big impact together.
Well, I think the reason they love each other is they're all classic Eagles fans, and they're very happy with that.
I just saw Lori giving me the sort of the time sign, but I'd love to at least leave a couple of minutes here for questions from the audience if we have any. Do we have time for questions from the audience? One or two? Okay, good. And if there isn't, there is one. Here we go.
Greg, you mentioned that there's basically you've got a decision to make at some point whether or not you're going to invest in some of these and how you're managing it. But even before that stage, space is limited to get into these pods and into the labs. Can you talk a little bit about how you're making decisions, who's making those decisions, and ultimately, how do you shape the portfolio of development? Engineering is one of the larger ones in the pod you're talking about. How are you shaping that? Because that sets direction, and it frankly helps you when they come out and develop.
A great point, great point. And I think, so we have two sets of decisions to make. One, we have this 58,000 square foot incubator that is, the third floor is entirely dedicated to robotics, okay? So we've amazing program in quad rotors, and that's actually attracted Qualcomm to be part of our campus. And so we actually have a curation committee that thinks about who fills the garages, who fills the labs. And so one of the battles is, should it be captive to the Penn community, or should we actually have startups from elsewhere in the Philadelphia region? And so we've had to basically be flexible in our approach. And it isn't so much first person there, but one of the companies outside the ecosystem really wanted to collaborate with Penn Engineering. So part of it is, what are the synergies that are there? In the JPod, that's more a partnership between us and Johnson & Johnson, or the leadership we have there. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about how we pick companies that are there.
Sure. So at J&J, when we look at these companies, we look at probably three fundamental things. First is it an important unmet need that this company is going after? And listen, that is somewhat subjective in that we may look at your science and technology and say, well, is this really credible? And can we pivot it to a bigger unmet need if it's not looking at something like that at the moment? And then we look at the team. Is it a rock star team? And now there are, your typical serial scientific founders who had exits in the past, and those are the golden tickets, and nobody's ever going to debate those. But then there are your new kind of rock star teams that have never done it before, but they're really passionate about what they're doing, and they have a good plan. Right? We may debate whether it's all right, but they've thought it all through, and that's what we look for. We look at those three things, and again, it doesn't have to be something that's in our strategic area of interest because it's a no strings attached model. And listen, over time, a big company's strategic areas of interest shift. So sometimes we shift into something that you're working on in your strategic areas of interest. And sometimes what you're working on will pivot into our strategic area of interest. And that's why we can be much more open than a traditional corporate investor might be. So those are the things. And listen, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Don't wait for perfection. That's the worst thing to do in doing a startup. You just got to get started. And you just got to start asking questions and plugging away and asking for feedback. And just start small, right? Start with something that you're interested in and start asking questions around that. And suddenly it'll blow up into something bigger. When I first started what is now Johnson & Johnson Innovation J-Lab, started out as my own little thing. And I just started out with asking questions. And bringing some people together, and it started building, and then it became this bigger thing, and then J&J came in, and now it's all it is. So just start out small, but start out with something that interests you, right? When you're doing something like a startup, you're going to face lots of hurdles along the way. And the only way you can get through all of those hurdles is if you're really passionate about it. If every time you get knocked down, you have a reason to get back up. And it's got to be something that is interesting to you, something you're passionate about, something that makes you feel like it's worth getting out of bed. So that's what we look for, people who are really passionate about it.
Melinda and Craig, thank you so much. One thing I have to say is it's really inspirational to see two humongous organizations acting so entrepreneurial. I think you're setting a great example for your target audience, so thank you. For the next portion of the program, I'd like to invite up Catherine Doyle. Catherine is a partner at the law firm of Saul Ewing. She's a very experienced patent attorney, but more importantly, she's a very good friend and one of the go-to people for biotech. So find her afterwards. But Catherine, thank you.
Hello, everybody. I know that this second panel is the last thing between you and refreshed booze, so we'll make it as exciting as we can, and you'll be happy you stayed in your seats. Thanks very much, John, for inviting us back, John and Lori. It's great to be back with old friends. It's my pleasure to moderate this panel. I'm a lawyer. I am absolutely aware that we are very integral to a lot of what we think are very important to this translational medicine approach, but you don't want to hear from me. So that's pretty much all I'm going to say beyond introducing the panel. Can you guys come up? Are you mic'd up? So I'm going to introduce everybody, and then they're going to take it away. Okay, we'll just go in the order that
So we're here?
you're here. Yep.
Okay.
You guys.
First one.
Yeah. Are the mics on?
Good.
You'll all switch. You want? Okay. So, starting with right next to me is Casey Cullen. And Casey is a research associate professor of neurosurgery. He works in neural engineering and neurotrauma, and he is going to talk to us a little bit about a new company that he's starting that his research is involved in called Interface. Two over is Michael Platt, who's the director of Wharton Neuroscience Initiative, and he's involved in a company called Cogware. And they look at how the brain makes decisions, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Not that yours is not either, honestly. And then in the middle is Dan Rizzuto. Did I pronounce that right? Okay. Nia Therapeutics, which happens to be a JLabs company. And they look at brain stimulation therapies for memory. And last but not least, at the very end is Stephen Kelly, and he is the CEO of Charisma, which is chimeric antigen receptors in macrophages to treat actually a variety of indications. So with no further ado, Casey, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I want to thank the organizers, Lori and John, for inviting me. So the brain is the most complex organ in the body. And when you have brain tissue degenerate due to traumatic brain injury, stroke, or neurodegenerative diseases such as Parkinson's, it not just affects the ability of one to interact in the world, but it really deteriorates the essence of who they are. And there's really no regenerative therapies right now that are capable of restoring or putting back nervous system tissue that is degenerated due to injury or disease. I founded Intervace just about 1 year ago, really to advance therapies to tackle that exact issue, looking at neural tissue replacement that could be patient-specific, but it's aimed at specifically putting back exquisite anatomical features that are necessary for one to regain function. Now, one of the key insights that led to our path of discovery was the fact that 60% of the brain volume, it's not individual nerve cells, but rather it's the connections. It's the pathways that will allow one part of the brain to communicate with another part of the brain. And this is really gives the brain its enormous processing power, that information can be separated, independently processed, and then come back together. These connections are crucial for all higher order function. They're very vulnerable, and when they're lost due to white matter stroke, brain injury, or as I mentioned, degenerative diseases like Parkinson's, there's no mechanism in the adult brain to get these back. And the reason is, all of these long distance connections called axons, they formed when you were an embryo, when target and source in the brain were within millimeters of each other. As your brain expands in the state of an embryo, and then even as you grow throughout into adolescence, these pathways lengthen as the brain expands to the point that they're 5, 6, 7 centimeters in the adult. So when they're lost, there's no mechanism to get them back. Now, people that have tried to get axons to regrow inside the brain have hit a wall due to the distances and due to the inhibitory environment. The breakthroughs that have come out of my lab, really over 10 years, but most acutely in the last 2 or 3 years, is the ability to tissue engineer these brain pathways outside the body in a transplantable form factor, and then microinject them back into the brain in order to reconnect discrete portions of the brain. So this is not simply a cell replacement strategy, although it is replacing nerve cells. It's simultaneously replacing who those nerve cells are supposed to talk to at the same time. So this is fundamentally different than other strategies that are aimed at growth factors, biomaterials, or even cells themselves, that we focus on reestablishing connections. So ultimately, for translation, we could see this as being a patient-specific therapy, although allogeneic cell sources could also be amenable to this type of work. But the breakthroughs that we've had have enabled us to get phenotypically controlled populations of brain cells. So our lead indication is actually Parkinson's disease. The motor symptoms of Parkinson's come when a deep region of the brain, the substantia nigra, degenerates, and this robs a higher region of the brain, the striatum, from its dopaminergic inputs. So we've tissue engineered the first nigra striatal pathway that, as I said, could be built in a patient-specific manner. So you're replacing a population of dopaminergic neurons, implanting it as a unit, so the axon terminals are deposited in the striatum. So you only need local integration to reconstruct that circuit. So we've shown that we can build these from various neuronal sources that are from rodents as well as human stem cells. And we've done this with human-induced pluripotent stem cells, which means we could potentially get these from adult patients de-differentiate them into dopaminergic neurons, build constructs to their specifications, so their pathway, diameter, length, et cetera, and implant them back. But we've had a lot of successes in rodent models where the pathway spans 5 or 6 millimeters. We've been able to implant these constructs. We've shown that they survive and are stable at least out to 3 months. We've shown that we can get back dopamine levels and that behavioral recovery is seen to correspond with survival of these constructs. We're now scaling this up to human-sized pathways, which is no small feat. The nigrostriatal pathway in humans is 3 to 5 centimeters. So far, we've grown these on the order of a few centimeters, but we have promising technology to get the lengths that we need. And we have an in-house large animal model of Parkinson's that will be testing the human constructs to show that this strategy scales to large animals. So to this date, the funding has come from the Department of Veterans Affairs, the NIH, and the Michael J. Fox Foundation. We've written an SBIR grant through the company to do product development work in parallel. With the lead indication being Parkinson's, I want to stress that these tissue-engineered brain pathways are very much a platform technology. We're also looking at these as anatomically fidelic test beds for pharmacologic screening. So it could be more representative of pharmacologic therapies and drug talks than even rodent models when you're using human cells as a starting material and you're recapitulating the anatomy. There's other indications such as stroke and also epilepsy that we're building constructs to reconstruct key pathways. And there's other indications that would allow these to be under computer control, where they're light activated, and we call these living deep brain stimulation constructs. So clearly further afield than the lead indication of putting back pathways where they were. But overall, Interface has been founded and is driven towards potentially patient-specific but anatomically inspired reconstruction of the brain to really put back architecture that has succumbed to neurodegenerative diseases and ideally give patients their lives back.
Thanks very much, Casey. I think for the sake of time, we'll probably hold all your questions till the end. And I know these folks are probably going to want their wine as well as you all. They'll be available. So, Michael.
Sure. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to start with a question. So how many people here feel like they're really in touch with their emotions, their feelings? I thought I'd get a bigger response. It's California, after all. How about other mental states? How about focus, distraction? How about something like creativity, decisiveness, right? Well, I hate to break it to you. I mean, well, you seem to already know. People have we're notoriously bad, right, at recognizing our own mental states. And that's because we really have conscious access only to a small sliver of the chatter amongst the 80 to 100 billion neurons in our brain that does all of the processing that we just heard about. So if we could actually provide high quality access to the data that's emerging from our brains, we can provide an objective tool for allowing individuals to improve their mental health, their well-being, and reach their peak potential. Unfortunately, there's currently no device on the market that provides medical-grade signal quality on the brain in a comfortable platform that allows for continuous monitoring, okay, in the home, while at work, etc. And so that is the unmet need that we saw about 1.5 years ago in my own lab. And our team began to think about ways to address the problem. And the key problem is the sensor. Okay, so if you want to be able to monitor the state of your brain, you need to have sensors that provide incredible conduction of the electrical impulses that are emanating from your brain. Okay, so high signal quality, but you have to do it in a comfortable platform that's dry and doesn't require gels or other kinds of things like that. And so my partner Arjun Ramakrishnan, who's back there, and I, we developed the concept about 1.5 years ago to meld, to fuse soft silicone wafers with silver nanowires, which it turns out, hands down, beats any of the other kinds of sensors that are on the market. We developed that further, and about this last March, PCI helped us file a provisional patent. We formed Cogware, our company providing quality EEG on the move. Last June, we acquired a number of different seed funding grants. And we've been collecting enabling data in a bunch of different applications and have been refining the technology ever since. And I think if you think about it, it's quite clear that the range of applications is enormous. And I often get criticized because I don't want to focus on any one particular market. But I mean, I'm like a kid in a candy store, because not only can we monitor objectively response to treatments for brain disorders, which we're doing in a partnership with colleagues at CHOP, but we can also monitor mental fatigue in transportation, in train operators, in truck drivers, et cetera. We can monitor signals that are potentially correlated with performance in sports, which we're doing with Penn Athletics and with a couple of different professional sports teams. So I think that the number and the range of applications is amazing. We've got the technology, and we're really excited about where our company is going to go in the next 6 months to a year.
Thank you very much. Dan?
There's a button on the bottom.
I'm not going to reach into
Better? All right. Imagine
You're on.
that. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to tell you guys about NIA Therapeutics. Thanks for showing up. So what I'm going to tell you about today may sound like something out of a science fiction movie. NIA Therapeutics is actually developing brain implants that can improve and restore memory function in human subjects. It may seem like science fiction, but it's actually based in a very rigorous science and mature product development capabilities. We've already built a proof of concept. We've proven its effectiveness in multiple clinical studies over the past 4 years. And we're now developing a system to treat traumatic brain injury. So let me tell you a little bit about traumatic brain injury. It can be a really devastating disease. The main symptoms of TBI are impairments in memory, attention, and learning. And it's estimated that there's about 5.3 million Americans that are currently living with a chronic disability due to a brain injury today. These brain injuries can be devastating. Many patients are unable to return to work or school after an injury. If they are lucky enough to return to work or school, they often find that they're not performing at the same level that they did before the injury. They report trouble with social situations, following the plot of a conversation, important details. It causes them social anxiety. They then withdraw from social situations, and that causes further distress. Some are diagnosed with a cognitive impairment after their brain injury, and many of these patients never recover. Real problem with TBI is that existing therapies are really limited. There's something called cognitive rehabilitation therapy, which is administered by an occupational therapist typically, and they basically treat these patients and teach them methods to deal with their injury, like using a notebook or rehearsal strategies. But the Institute of Medicine has already indicated that there's limited evidence that these therapies are actually effective. So no therapy has actually ever been proven to improve human memory in rigorous scientific clinical studies until now. Over the past 4 years at the University of Pennsylvania, I've been developing a brain stimulation technology that can be used to improve human memory. This research has been supported with $23 million in support from DARPA, the military's R&D agency, in an effort to build new therapies for TBI. We've enrolled over 300 patients with neurosurgical electrodes implanted into their brain onto our studies. We work with these patients every day. We administer memory tasks, we record their brain activity, and we stimulate in an effort to modulate memory performance. And we've had really good success. We've published multiple studies showing how you can use brain stimulation to improve human memory. The key is to stimulate at the right time, at the right place in the brain. Turns out that the right time is when memory is predicted to fail. You don't want to stimulate the brain when the brain is in a good state, and we can tell when the brain is in a good state from these neural biomarkers of memory that we've been studying for the past 20 years. You want to stimulate when the patient is in a poor memory state, as indicated by these neural biomarkers, these electrophysiological signals like EEG in the brain that predict performance. If you do stimulate at the right time and at the right location, which is in left lateral temporal cortex, just over the left ear, you can actually improve human memory. You can improve patients' list recall, the memory for words, by about 20%. This is really an incredible result because this was proven in a randomized, controlled study and blinded study, and this has never been done before. So on the next slide, if it's possible to go there, I'm going to show you the NIA system concept. The NIA system includes implanted leads, 4 leads that are implanted in 4 different areas of the brain. These leads pick up these electrophysiological signals that predict memory performance. We have a sensor and stimulator that continuously monitors the state of the brain from these 4 electrodes and determines if the patient's in a good memory state or a poor memory state, and selectively stimulates to keep the patient in a good memory state. You can think of this therapy as keeping the patient in the zone. There's also a cloud-based AI backend that personalizes the therapy for each patient. This is really the key piece of the puzzle. Now, we've already built a proof of concept, like I've mentioned. We partnered with Medtronic while I was at the University of Pennsylvania and developed a stimulator that we're using in our clinical studies. But now we need to develop a commercial grade system that we can bring through the clinical trials process and bring to market. We spun out from Penn with support from DARPA. We raised $1.6 million in funding in November. This will allow us to build out the key team, design the device, and meet with the FDA to confirm the clinical and the regulatory pathway. But we're going to need to raise considerably more to bring this therapy to market. So to wind up, why now, why NIA? NIA is pursuing something that is fundamentally different in the area of memory disorders than any other company is pursuing. This is based on a deep understanding of the electrophysiological biomarkers of human memory that's been built up over the past 20 years at the University of Pennsylvania and the most leading academic medical centers around the country. Our therapy has the potential to alleviate cognitive disability in 25% of patients with TBI. Imagine that for a second. A patient who was previously diagnosed with a cognitive disability after a brain injury, after using the NIA system, they no longer have a cognitive disability. Imagine a college student who got into a massive car wreck, who's able to come back to school and to continue to get straight A's. Imagine a senior partner at a law firm who, after experiencing a ski accident, is able to come back to work and continue to outcompete his junior partners at the firm. That's the vision that NIA is bringing. We hope that we can partner with you to bring that to reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. Thanks for using the word lawyer. Stephen.
I'll just start off with the word lawyer just to get your So I'm Steve Kelly, President and CEO of Charisma Therapeutics. We are a little bit of an outlier with the rest of the panelists. Number one, we're not in neuroscience, we're in oncology, although we may have some applicability in neuroscience. And secondly, I'm not the scientific founder of the company. I came into the company last February, but it was formed out of technology at Penn. And Sar Gill and Mike Klaczynski were the co-founders of the company. It went through the PCI ecosystem and was formed and shepherded along the way with that help. And I came in after all of that, so I missed all of that, but I hear fond tales. But to tell you a little bit about Charisma. So to set the stage, it probably makes sense to talk about the hallmarks of oncology as described by Weinberg and Hanahan, one of the hallmarks is the ability of cancer or tumors to evade immune destruction. And so if you think about what does that really mean, all of us right now have mutated cells in our bodies that our immune system finds, identifies, and destroys and keeps going on. At some point, that changes, and the immune system stops recognizing the cells as foreign and lets them grow, and in some cases facilitates that growth. There's a lot of effort that has gone into re-engaging the immune system, from cancer vaccines to checkpoint inhibitors, and out of Penn, CAR-T has been an approach. CAR-T has generated some significant outcomes in hematologic malignancy, leukemias, and lymphomas, but has been challenged in solid tumors. And two of the reasons we believe that that is occurring are, one, T cells have a difficult time accessing the solid tumor, like breast, lung, ovarian, this sort of thing. And secondly, the tumor microenvironment is highly immunosuppressive. And so we wanted to attack it a little bit differently. What could we do that would overcome those issues that you're seeing with other cell therapy approaches? And our solution is engineered macrophages. Macrophages are a really unique cell in the body that has a lot of characteristics that lend itself to a solid tumor application. Number one, if you think about what a macrophage generally does, it's the body's Pac-Man. It goes around and finds things that shouldn't be there and eats them. And the other element that macrophages do is they're professional antigen-presenting cells. And so after they consume the foreign body, they're able to take antigens from within that target cell, in this case would be cancer, and present things out as things that activate other members of the immune system to destroy. And so we think that it really lends itself to a solid tumor application. And so what we've done is leverage that biology and introduced a CAR, or a chimeric antigen receptor, similar to CAR-T, and added a targeting moiety to it. So what we have is a CAR macrophage that will identify the antigen target of choice. In our case, the lead antigen is HER2, and then will traffic to the site of the tumor. It will engage that tumor, consume it, process and present antigen from the tumor, and it generate an adaptive immune response. So that's the promise of our technology. We were able to raise almost $60 million in a Series A last year, and we're using that. Penn actually participated in that fundraising, so that was great. And there's really two uses of proceeds for that funding. Number one, we have a lead program, our HER2 CAR macrophage, and what we want to do is demonstrate a biologic proof of concept with that. And so we are driving towards an IND and a phase 1 clinical study. Anticipate that we can get there in the second half of this year and generate that data. So mid-2020, we should be able to demonstrate that this concept is working. The second use of proceeds for this funding is to look at our discovery platform, enhance it, and optimize it. So right now we have nothing disparaging to Mike and SAR. We have an academic project that now we have to commercialize. And so there are a lot of things that we can do with this external funding to enhance our responses and optimize and generate a very robust platform that has broad applicability. The second part of that, of course, with the discovery platform is to generate additional things in our pipeline. And so we have two additional programs that we'll initiate this year to add to our lead program, the HER2 macrophage. We'll be looking at antigens that are outside of HER2, so looking at prostate cancer and lung cancer areas where we're going. So it's a very exciting time for the company. We're about 9 people now. We anticipate growing to around 30 people by the end of this year. And it's really, really exciting, and I think a testament to the work that was done at Penn and at PCI to really facilitate the growth of the company and moving forward. So I guess it's all I want to say.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Steve. We have just a very short amount of time for any questions anybody might have. Question over here.
A question for Dan and Casey. Do you see any applications for dementia or possibly Alzheimer's in your work as well?
Absolutely. If you don't mind. We think that traumatic brain injury and Alzheimer's are the two top memory impairment diseases that we would like to treat. TBI is first. We actually have TBI pilot data already, so that's why we're focused on the TBI market first. But we think that this can be applied to early Alzheimer's disease as well. We don't think it'll alter the disease course, but it's capable of rolling back the clock by 2 years, and that would imagine a patient with Alzheimer's who has 2 more years to remember their family. That could be really impactful.
So for our therapy, Alzheimer's is further down on the list because there's more, the degeneration is more widespread, and there's not specific pathways that succumb early in the progression as there is in Parkinson's. However, if we achieve proof of concept with disorders that have more stereotypical pathway degeneration, then this does open the door for personalized therapies where there's high-resolution brain scanning on a per-patient basis, and the extent of degeneration, the extent of pathway loss in that patient could then be the recipe to build made-to-order constructs, if you would, to put back those pathways. But Alzheimer's is further down the list because it would be a much more widespread degeneration and more pathways would be afflicted.
One more question up in the back.
Thanks. Not sure if this is a question for Casey. Given that you're trying to solve what is fundamentally a physical problem that has to do with the scale, I think, right? You're talking about solving this Parkinson's issue in an MPTP model in rodents. How do you deal with the fact that the distance is larger in non-human primates and then scaling once again to humans? Can you comment a little bit on the regulatory pathway or the translation pathway you did, if that's possible?
Yes, so it is going to be a big challenge to scale the constructs. We know from other literature basically what is the dose of axons that you'll need as you go up the hierarchy of species. We know the lengths that we'll need to achieve, and these, if you will be the benchmarks to build these constructs. We can validate dopamine release, so we know functional levels that can be measured on a per construct basis prior to implantation, so a good functional release criteria. But you're right, even going to large animals, the pathways are only going to be about 1.5 to 2 centimeters, whereas they can be at least twice that length in humans. So we'd have to have some ability to do the non-clinical safety, tolerability, and efficacy with a pathway that is going to be shorter than the ultimate product used in people. And I think due to the clear limitations that the FDA will work with us on that aspect. But building three-dimensional tissue, you have clear structural and functional specifications that can be release criteria. So in essence, the quality assurance that we can have is far beyond what would be possible with other stem cell or neuron replacement therapies where there's just a bunch of cells being injected. They can't validate structure going in the way that we can. So for those advantages, I think that there'll be regulatory advantages in our favor.
Thank you.
Any other questions? There's one way up in the back.
So, question is slightly more for Steve, but applies to the whole panel. I haven't heard much discussion on the panel about the use of AI or ML with respect to the types of solutions you're trying to create. Any thought of using AI modeling in terms of designing the phase that you're working on, or more generally for the panel, how does it tie into what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so we're using machine learning tools. I didn't talk about the algorithm side of things, but in the lab we've been developing a bunch of different algorithms that help us to decode the kind of data that we can collect via EEG and other kinds of physiological biomarkers. And so we're able to use that to make really, I think, exquisite predictions about what people are about to do or the kinds of experiences that they're undergoing that are often discordant from what they might state verbally. And we've also had quite good success at classifying people and even identifying subclinical correlates of depression and anxiety in people who don't report that coming in. So we've been pretty excited about that. That's going to be a big part of the toolkit we have, especially when we can collect EEG data continuously outside the lab under normal circumstances. So if we can, that's going to be the only way that we can relate and the data that we're acquiring from the brain to the kinds of performance that we're seeing in real life, and that gets us away from self-report, from scales, from checklists, et cetera.
There was a question here.
Yeah, for Casey. For Casey, can you say a little bit more about the implantation procedure in the brain, and also would there be any applicability for spinal cord injury, say for reconnecting distal and proximal portions of the cord?
Yeah, those are great questions. I didn't get into the delivery paradigm just to stay out of the weeds, but we do stereotactic neurosurgical procedures. So getting very precise on the millimeter scale. It's routinely done in a neurosurgical setting, either image-guided or just with traditional stereotactic implantation. We're able to do that in rodents and soon to be in large animals. Our philosophy is to work with the clinicians, the neurosurgeons, my home department, work with the neurosurgeons for these large animal studies to ensure that it's clinical best practices that we're using to put in the constructs, so that when it does translate to humans, we've already come over many of those hurdles. But basically, once the constructs are built, they're drawn up into a catheter that can be straight or curved. It's delivered to the deposit point, a plunger's engaged, and then you remove the catheter and you're depositing the long spaghetti-like construct in the wake of withdrawing. Now, some of the big breakthroughs, I didn't get too much into this either, but they're really micro tissue engineering breakthroughs, that we're able to build this anatomical tissue that has a diameter of just a few hundred microns or a millimeter, because all real estate in the brain is precious. We're pushing length, we're pushing density of axons, but ultimately we want the cross-section to be very small so that when we're depositing it, it has as minimal a footprint as possible. Quickly, your other question was spinal cord. It's a follow-on indication, but we have built these constructs with spinal motor neurons and dorsal root ganglia sensory neurons that are the main constituents of the spinal column, in or adjacent to the spinal column. And we have begun studies very early in rats to look at the efficacy of this strategy. So I don't have any data to share on that, but it's another indication we're looking at.
Okay, well, I think if we could have another round of applause for
Before everyone heads back outside to enjoy more food or drink, I wanted to thank everyone who participated here. In addition to these companies, Penn is actively fundraising for about 15 startups. So there's a sheet here that lists what those are, that is also outside. I also wanted to point out that you can contact me, John Swartley, my colleagues Ben Dibling, Mike Dishowitz, Jim Bowen, Mark Turco, and Craig, if you dare, to ask about these companies. And I also wanted to add a great time to come to Philadelphia to learn more about Penn or these folks or all the commercialization work we're doing is during the International Bio Convention, which is in Philadelphia this year, the first week of June. Penn will have a very visible presence there, but it's really a great time to come to Philadelphia, maybe see the Pennovation Center, our partnership with J-Labs, and I think you'll be surprised about how much Philly has changed maybe since the last time you're there. So thank you again.
That you're developing. Yeah. Do you have a preferred indication that you want to target first? That's smart. Yep. Yeah, likewise, Casey. Oh, thank you.
Well, so and then we want to do
Where patients can go home? That's awesome, yeah.
play outside.
That would be yeah, I support that. Hey, how are you? Carlos, good to meet you.
nice presentation, and I was listening to I was thinking about a lot of questions and ideas. What do you think if you combine your techniques with stimulant medications like methylphenidate or dexamphetamine? Do you think that the process will speed up?
That's a really good question, yeah.
Yeah, so, and also maybe it was for them, but for him, but probably might work better with finally you stimulate that area of your brain that is technique, but also you add chemistry. I mean, you add
I didn't know until. Yeah, I saw like a finger, and that was it. That's what it was enough. Yeah, obviously it was enough. Barely enough. Inventions. Yeah. I was calling him. I'm gonna go get a drink. They lost to the Blues. It's not really? Yeah. Not a good thing. It's very reminiscent. No, I mean, it's almost like. That's not a lot of close things. Oh. Going out. Spartan. Yeah. Now somebody is in. You guys work together? Yeah, he's an ambassador and he's in different. That's a board member for. He also has his own. Right? You know how it works. I just soon I'll tap. You know what's funny? Oh, Jerry? Yeah, I knew. Oh, I got a great person. Yeah, both of you are very well. Yeah. Finally, I got her to running another company. I was the one who. Yeah, that was right. Oh, is that right? This is. Everyone is an entrepreneur, a board member. That's right. Well, I'd say an investor, but I am an investor, but it's a percentage. Low. Well, I think that's right. I've got 3. It keeps life interesting. Things that are going on. Absolutely. The largest revenue goal. So, what's your it's called Good People. Yeah. We just got top 10. You did? Just talking about what's your second? Oh, yeah. Orlandale. I started. I'm not familiar with. Yeah. Good People is the one that's actually. You can get good people here because I've had it there. My daughter goes to Georgia Tech. So okay, yeah. I'm my card for my. Hey, you got lots of podcasts. This card. Which one is it? Here's my card for my. And I promise not to bother you to invest. But send me your material. That's why we're out here. Because sure. Or spending. That's exactly. I'm gonna write
Yeah, that's or you like to drink.
What is council?
Two of the founders meet. That's why
He's third year. Actually, no.
that's exciting.
Yeah, she's a little free. That's a big step. I mean, I remember the first.
I had no idea what I was doing. No, I really need to know what you want to do. I don't even know how to respond to you.
It's funny, you mentioned I just and I just had my high school buddies. One of the executives at Madison. And part of that happened. Anderson, when they were starting the iPhone. Working on the hardware. Cell phones and that. For last and over I bought out by Google. Not working right now. And to stay on.
Oh yeah.
The reason I say that is I want to do like
Great. Oh my God, she would love to know. For years, I was
There's a bunch of Georgia Penn people. He said when the iPhone product started, they actually cell phone technology in Atlanta. Yeah, it's very, very.
Ask Jessica. Got my daughter's interview. That's
Want to go somewhere else?
I was an engineer. I actually was an industrial.
And you were right?
Yeah, that I did. Graduated.
When were you there?
I graduated in 93.
I had some friends there, but they were. We do married to great friends. We've just started the company. We now have some funding. Yeah.
You can always use more.
We can always use more. We have enough that we're. I just signed the lead. At the Science Center. We're going to be at this. Part of the reason for that. Everything $150,000 for they're going to provide a half-ax is what so I can manage $3,000 but once we get
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's right. So we're the manufacturer. We're manufacturing.
right now, so we're going
but we're using Friday, actually. I fly back Thursday. Friday, I should be walking. Is there ribbon cutters? Well, you know, it's a... I don't know, maybe I'll just go down and spill... It's your spot. But the idea is... shared words, mailing address, you know, all the... But the key thing is getting buying power as well. You see, I don't have one, so I'm talking to